I was slicing bread when he said it. You're a loser. Mom's got a real man now. An hour later, I got an email saying my room had been reserved. I was at my sink on Maple Street in Beaverton, the warm light over the stove turning the crumbs on the cutting board gold. The bread knife rasped against the crust of a baguette. The bowl still smelled faintly of chicken soup and black pepper. The fridge hummed steady, the only thing in this house that still felt reliable. Evan didn't even say it to my face, he said it to the room, loud enough for Rick to smirk. Rick pulled the napkin from his lap, adjusted his expensive watch, and I noticed a brand new leather belt. The brass buckle caught the light when he leaned back. Laura said nothing, her head bent over her phone, as if someone else's Instagram feed could cover the table like a tablecloth. Eat while it's warm, I said quietly, and instantly regretted saying anything. In the old hutch, a single shot glass rattled like the house clearing its throat. Outside, someone walked a dog, and somewhere farther off, a kid laughed on a bike. The world kept moving the way it should. I washed the bowls. Warm water stung my hands. The lemon dish soap clung to my skin. The damp towel stuck to my wrist. Evan reached across for the salt without looking at me, his sleeve rustling against the vinyl tablecloth. Ma, Rick's taking Mason to practice tomorrow, okay? He spoke as if I were an empty chair. I nodded, not to them, but to the spoons in the rack. Hope is a ridiculous thing. It sounds like the low hum of the fridge, like maybe it could breathe out an apology for you. I waited for anyone to say, "Dad, sorry." It slipped out. Instead, Rick carried his plate to the sink, peeked into my old trash cabinet. "Where's the bag?" and smiled the way people smile at someone whose time is already up. Mason, my grandson, was crouched under the table with a Lego box, whispering, "Dad, look." A tower. The only warm thing in the room that still felt alive. I caught his eyes for a second. He grinned, a little conspirator, before turning back to his bricks. When the door shut behind them, the hallway still smelled faintly of Rick's cologne and Laura's vanilla lotion. Their coats swung on the hook forgotten, like contempt, and I hung it neatly, just in case. Through the front window, the neighbor's girl ran by with her dog, the tag on its collar jingling. I poured tea into a scratched mug, one from the set. Elaine bought the week we moved here and sat down. Crumbs clung to my elbow when I leaned on the table. The phone lay face down, like a tired animal. I let my hand rest on it for a long moment, feeling the faint warmth from the last touch, as if the device itself were deciding whether to turn over. The first was in the mailbox, the old, metal kind. Thick envelope, heavy stock, with the logo, Suncrest Realty Valuation, Portland, Oregon. My name printed at the bottom, Daniel Parker, Maple Street. I ran my thumb over the edge of the paper. Toner left a faint smear. Preliminary property valuation, exterior only. Under it, polite words about exclusive representation, and a line. Initial facade inspection completed. Interior access required. I set it on the table beside my mug. Then the phone blinked once. Cedarview assisted living your placement is confirmed. The subject line looked like ice cubes. I swiped, opened it. We are pleased to welcome you, Mr. Parker. Your placement is scheduled for Saturday. Courtesy shuttle to arrive at Maple Street between 12 o'clock and 3 p.m. Please bring medication list and photo ID. At the bottom, in italics. If you did not submit this application personally, please contact your primary representative listed below. I looked up and caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. Only the glow from the neighbor's house outlined me. Across the street, someone was cutting pie. Laughter drifted over the cold air. My hand found the picture frame of Elaine. My wife always loved pie. The wood felt warm, smelled faintly of dust. "It's okay, Lane," I whispered, not to her, but to myself. I read the Suncrest letter again, the agent's name, Elena Price, Oregon license number, a Portland number. No magic here, just someone else's hand slipping into my life through paperwork. I looked back at the Cedarview email. Friendly tone, talk of an adaptation program. At the bottom was a neat table, primary contact. I caught myself hoping it would be blank. Blank would have been honest. The porch board creaked in the damp night air. The scent of wet soil and cheap tobacco drifted in someone passing by. I set my mug on a coaster, smoothed the Suncrest envelope flat, and laid it on top of my old, scuffed notebook. My fingers reached for the pen, but I stopped. Don't rush. Don't write until you see the last piece. I scrolled down the email slowly. The primary contact line stared back like an open window in winter. Primary contact. Evan Parker, Mobile, 503. I read it out loud quietly, so I wouldn't wake the neighbor's dog or my own heart. Then I placed the phone face down, just like it had been before all this, and listened to the fridge hum. Same steady sound, same calm, but nothing was the same anymore. I left the phone face down on the table and pushed the mug away. The tea had gone a pale, cloudy brown, the kind Elaine used to call sad water. The fridge kicked on harder, a low vibration through the floor. I slid the Suncrest envelope to the side, opened the drawer under the counter, and pulled out the yellow legal pad I hadn't touched in months. The paper smelled faintly of cardboard and lemon cleaner. The mailbox still held a thin layer of damp from the night air. I stood there for a moment in the open doorway, looking at the streetlight pooling orange over the wet pavement. Across the way, a man in a baseball cap was locking up his pickup. His wife was calling him in for dinner. The sound carried easy in the cool air. Back at the table, I laid the Suncrest letter flat, pressed it with my palm, and copied the date, address, and agent's name onto the pad. Then I took the phone and, with 2 fingers, scrolled back up to the Cedarview email. I wrote that down. Time received. Subject line. The exact wording. My handwriting looked like it belonged to someone older than me. The clock over the pantry ticked loud, the way it only does when you notice it. I flipped the envelope over, noting the return address in Portland. I didn't plan on calling not yet, but I circled the zip code in red. When you're not invited to the table, you learn to gather scraps quietly. In the corner, Mason had left a single red Lego brick on the floor. I picked it up, the edges biting into my fingertips, and set it on the counter by the mug. I didn't know why I kept it there. Maybe because it was his, and maybe because it wasn't theirs. At 9:30, the house phone rang, the landline I keep for bills and wrong numbers. The voice on the other end was warm, almost rehearsed. Mr. Parker, this is Rachel from Cedarview Assisted Living. We're just confirming your intake appointment for Saturday. Courtesy shuttle will be... I let her finish the whole script. My eyes went to the Suncrest letter, the word valuation underlined twice. Rachel, I said when she paused. Who scheduled this for me? There was a short click of keys. Primary contact is Evan Parker. We have his mobile ending in 72. I see, I said. Thank you for letting me know. I hung up. The quiet filling the kitchen so fast it felt staged. The fridge hummed again. I wrote, Rachel. Intake confirmation in the margin of the pad. Underlined it once. Through the side window, I caught the glow of tail lights slowing in front of the house. A sedan. Silver. It paused, then rolled on. In its reflection on the wet asphalt, the Maple Street sign bent in the night breeze. By 10, the only sound was the heater kicking on and the faint ticking from the old wall clock. I put the Suncrest envelope, the printout of the Cedarview email, and my notes into the manila folder I used to keep Elaine's medical bills. The clasp clicked shut, a sound too sharp for the room. I stood in the hallway a moment before bed, looking at the coat they'd left. The faint scent of Rick's cologne had already faded into something neutral. I thought about putting it outside on the porch, but I left it. Sometimes it's better when they forget what they've left behind. In the bedroom, the curtains leaked a thin stripe of streetlight across the floorboards. The legal pad sat on the nightstand. I didn't turn off the lamp. Instead, I wrote one last line at the bottom of the page. Saturday. Don't answer the door. The legal pad stayed on the nightstand, the pencil balanced across it like a bridge. By morning, the rain had left the front walk dark and slick, the maple leaves plastered flat against the concrete. I made coffee in the old drip machine Elaine bought before Mason was born, the glass carafe clouded with years of use. The smell filled the kitchen, slow, steady, like it had all the time in the world. I took my mug to the front window and watched the street. The neighbor across the way was already scraping frost off his windshield with the edge of a credit card. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at the mail truck. Normal sounds. The first knock was so light I almost missed it. 3 taps against the front door, then silence. I walked over, checked through the peephole, no one. The wet print of a shoe smeared across the top step, fresh enough to glisten. No box, no flyer. Just the mark, leading back toward the sidewalk. I unlocked the deadbolt, opened the door a crack. The air smelled like damp pine and cigarette smoke, the cheap kind that comes in soft packs. I looked down. The mark was from a heavy sole, crosshatch pattern. Not mine. I stepped back inside, closed the door, and clicked the lock twice. On the coffee table, I laid out the manila folder, flipped it open, and slid a blank sheet of paper in. I traced the outline of the shoe print from memory, rough but clear enough. Next to it, I wrote front step, 8:15 a.m. The coffee had cooled by the time I set the pen down. At 10, I went out the back way, down the narrow gravel path to the alley. The garbage bin was already pulled to the curb. I hadn't moved it. I stood there a moment, the cold damp working into my collar, then tipped the lid back. Nothing unusual, just the week's trash. But the bin smelled faintly of cologne, not mine. By noon, the clouds had lifted enough to throw pale light through the living room. I sat at the desk by the window, flipping through the Suncrest letter again. The return address sat there in neat black ink, as if daring me to respond. I didn't. Instead, I took a photo of it with my phone, then another of the Cedarview email on the screen. Both went into a hidden folder in my cloud account. That evening, Mason stopped by with Laura to drop off a pair of gloves I'd bought him. He dug through the Lego box while Laura stood in the doorway, her phone in her hand, tapping fast. "Dad, you should really think about," she started, then stopped, smiling too quickly. "About what?" I asked. "Nothing. Just things," she said, looking past me toward the coat rack. When they left, the house felt larger, colder. I walked to the front door, checked the lock again. The faint outline of the shoe print was still on the step, drying now to a dusty gray. I reached into the pocket of my sweater and felt the folded tracing. Upstairs, I put it into the folder with the rest. Before closing it, I wrote another line at the bottom of the pad. Change one lock. Leave the other. The next morning, the light was sharper, the kind that makes every dust line on the counter show. I stood at the sink, rinsing the coffee pot, when the side gate squealed open. Mason's voice carried in, high and unbothered. "Grandpa." He came in ahead of Laura, his sneakers squeaking on the tile. She followed a step behind, phone in hand, thumbs moving. "He forgot his water bottle at practice," she said without looking up. Mason dropped his backpack by the table and went straight for the Lego box in the corner. Plastic clinked and clicked in a rhythm only kids can make. Laura wandered toward the living room window, phone to her ear now, speaking low. I caught only one word, "Elena," before she saw me watching and stepped into the hall. I knelt beside Mason, handed him a small bag of the cookies he likes. "Thanks," he said, mouth already full. Then, quieter, like telling me a joke. "Grandpa, did you know Mom said you're going on a trip? And Rick's getting a big discount 'cause of his work friends?" He grinned, unaware of the weight in those words, and went back to building a crooked tower. I kept my voice level. "What kind of trip?" He shrugged. "The one with doctors. They have a bus," Mom said Saturday. He found a missing brick and snapped it on, pleased with himself. Laura reappeared, all smile now. "We should get going." She didn't meet my eyes when she called Mason over. His tower tipped and fell as he stood. A single blue brick rolled under the stove. When the door shut behind them, the house felt thinner. I went to the counter, picked up the mug I'd left there, and stared at the faint swirl of coffee grounds at the bottom. On the table, Mason's cookie bag sat half open. I folded it neatly, placed it in the fridge. Then I wrote it down. Mason discount via Rick's work, bus on Saturday. Name, Elena. I underlined discount twice. In the margin, I drew a small arrow toward the word Elena, connecting it to the suncrest letter in my folder. By evening, the sky had gone the flat gray of wet paper. I sat at the desk, the folder open, comparing the phone number from the letter to one scribbled on a sticky note by the landline. Both began with the same Portland area code. My thumb traced the edge of the note until the corner curled. Somewhere down the street, a screen door banged. A car started, headlights sweeping briefly across my living room wall. I closed the folder, set it under the legal pad, and turned off the desk lamp. On the way upstairs, I stopped by the front door and slid the new brass key into the top lock, just to feel it turn. The lower lock I left the same. The next day, the air was thin and cold, the kind that makes every sound sharper. I locked the front door behind me, feeling the new brass key turn clean in the top lock, the old one still loose in the lower. The folder fit easily into my coat pocket, manila edges softened from years of use. Downtown was quiet for a Thursday morning. The sidewalk in front of Whitman and Reed Legal smelled faintly of wet concrete and the roasted coffee from the cafe next door. I paused under the awning, watching a young couple across the street laugh over paper cups, their breath curling into the air. Inside, the reception area was all glass and polished wood. The hum of a copy machine came from somewhere behind the frosted door. "Mr. Parker, we're ready for you," the woman at the desk said. Her voice was neutral, practiced. The conference room smelled of toner and lemon polish. I placed the folder on the table, sliding out the Suncrest letter, the Cedarview printout, and my legal pad. Across from me, the notary adjusted her glasses, scanning the first page. "You're transferring the property into a trust, on behalf of Elaine Parker?" "Yes," I said, effective immediately. Her pen scratched over the forms, the sound quick and dry. She passed me each page, and I signed in the slow, deliberate way my father taught me, full name, never initials. The paper was cool under my palm. We worked in silence, the only interruption the muffled ring of a phone somewhere in the building. When she finished, she slid the stamped packet back to me. "This will be recorded with the county this afternoon," she said. I slipped it into the folder. The weight of it felt different now. Outside, the clouds had thinned enough to let a hard white light spill over the street. The couple was gone. In their place, a delivery man in a green jacket was wheeling boxes into the cafe. The smell of fresh bread drifted out when the door opened. I walked back toward the bus stop, the packet pressed under my arm. A silver SUV slowed as it passed me. Tinted windows, no plates on the front bumper. It kept going. At home, I set the folder in the drawer of the desk, under a stack of old tax returns. Then I sat in the kitchen with the same scratched mug, letting the coffee cool. From the front step came the soft thud of something being dropped a flyer. Maybe. I stayed in my chair until I heard the sound of shoes moving away. When I finally opened the door, the flyer was for Exclusive Senior Living Cedarview. The edges were still warm from the Sunday. I slid it into the folder without a word. That night, the wind rattled the loose gutter over the porch, a hollow clatter every few minutes. I sat at the desk, the drawer with the folder closed tight, the legal pad on top. The lamp cast a small circle of light. Everything beyond it fell into shadow. Just after 10, I heard it, the faint click of the lower lock turning. Not the top one, the old one I'd left untouched. The sound was careful, unhurried. I stayed still, eyes on the door, until the click came again, followed by the soft scrape of rubber soles on the wood floor inside the entry. The steps didn't go far, just a few paces. Then the door eased shut. No knock, no voice. The air in the hallway shifted, carrying a trace of cheap tobacco and winter air. When the house settled again, I got up, walked to the entry, and looked down. A smear of damp on the rug, shaped like the edge of a shoe. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want the glow spilling outside. Instead, I bent, touched the wet spot. With my fingertips, cold, clean water, no grit. I went back to the desk, tore a sheet from the pad, and wrote, 10:12 p.m. Entry via lower lock. No attempt on upper. Then I drew the shoe outline from memory, adding a note. Same crosshatch pattern as 11/3. The rest of the night, I kept the hallway light off, listening. Nothing else came. In the morning, pale sun cut through the blinds, striping the kitchen floor. I made coffee, poured it into the same scratched mug. On the counter, something was out of place. The cookie bag I'd put in the fridge after Mason's visit was now on the counter, folded differently. I opened it. One cookie gone. The fridge hummed. I looked at the lower lock, then at the bag, and slid it into the trash. By noon, the damp spot on the rug had dried. I took the rug outside, shook it once, and left it over the porch rail. Across the street, a man in a blue windbreaker was washing his truck, music playing faint from the open cab. The normalcy of it was almost funny. Inside, I added one more line to the pad. Next document key access pattern. The next evening, I set the house the way a fisherman sets a line. A thin slip of paper wedged in the lower doorframe, low enough that you'd only disturb it by opening the old lock. A chair angled just so against the edge of the hall table. A folded dish towel balanced on the fridge handle, where the smallest tug would drop it to the floor. The rest of the night, I moved through the rooms like nothing had changed. Coffee at the kitchen table. News on low volume. Lights out by 11. In the morning, the paper at the door was gone. Not fallen. Gone. The chair had shifted an inch toward the wall, and the towel lay crumpled on the linoleum. I wrote each one down, time-stamped it, then took photos. The empty spot in the doorframe, the faint arc of the chair leg's scrape in the dust, the towel's crease where it had caught on the fridge handle. By noon, I was at the hardware store, buying another lock cylinder. The man at the counter wore a red cap, his name stitched on the front. "You changing all of them?" he asked, sliding the box across. "Not yet," I said. Back home, I left the new lock in its package on the counter, where it would be visible to anyone who came in. Beside it, I placed the Suncrest letter and the Cedarview printout, open to the page with Evan's name. Around 3, a text buzzed in from an unknown number. "We can work this out. No need for drama." I didn't reply. I took a screenshot instead, saved it to the hidden folder with the rest. At dusk, Mason's voice came through the side gate again. He was with Laura, carrying a grocery bag. "Mom said these are for you," he said, handing it over bread, eggs, and a jar of coffee. Inside, the bread bag had a small folded flyer tucked in. "Exclusive senior living special corporate rate available." Laura kept her coat on, glancing at the counter. Her eyes landed on the Suncrest letter, then on the unopened lock. She smiled thinly. "Doing some home improvements?" "Just keeping things in order," I said. When they left, the house felt the same as the night before still, the way a lake holds its surface before the wind changes. I picked up the lock, turned it in my hand, and set it back down. Then I wrote one more line in the pad. "They know I know." The call to Cedarview came just after lunch. The hold music was tinny, like it came from a far room. When the director answered, I gave my name and asked why I'd received confirmation for a placement I hadn't requested. "Mr. Parker, we were told you'd agreed to an early move-in." "At the corporate rate," she said. Her tone was polite, professional, but there was a pause after each phrase, like she was checking a script. I told her no such consent existed. She said she'd make a note and pause all arrangements until further notice. Before I hung up, I called Suncrest. I asked Elena's assistant to send me copies of any outbound emails about my address. She forwarded the thread within the hour. The from line carried Rick's company domain. I printed the first page, the paper warm and smelling faintly of toner, and slid it into the folder. The printer fan kept running for a moment after, humming into the quiet room. That evening, Mark from Cedarview called back. He apologized for misunderstanding the urgency and said the bus for Saturday morning would be canceled. His voice was careful, like he knew someone else might be listening. I wrote the time and his exact words in the pad, then set the pen down and watched the street. A couple walked by under one umbrella, their coats brushing in step. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner from the morning. I made tea and sat with it until the cup was empty, the room quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Outside, the first light rain began to patter against the window, soft and steady. The next morning I left the house earlier than usual. Frost dusted the edges of the lawn. The air smelled clean and metallic. I locked the top brass deadbolt, left the lower one as it was. Downtown, the bank's glass doors gave off a faint smell of polish and cold air from the lobby vents. I stood in line behind a man depositing a stack of holiday cards into the ATM. When it was my turn, I asked for a meeting with someone from mortgage services. The woman who waved me in had neat hair and a pen clipped to her blazer pocket. I gave her my name, the loan number, and waited while she pulled up the file. The glow from her monitor lit the side of her face. "You're listed as co-borrower," she said, tapping the screen. "Looks like the account is 2 payments behind." "And then?" I asked. "And then either the balance is brought current, or the property can be moved toward liquidation with consent from any co-borrower on file." I nodded, as if it were just a detail for my own budgeting. She printed a statement with the due dates in bold red. I folded it once, slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. On my way out, the lobby was filling with people, a young couple in gym clothes, laughing over a coffee cup, an older man counting bills into an envelope. Life moving as if everyone had a seat at the table. At home, I added the bank statement to the folder, behind the Suncrest and Cedarview letters. Then I called the county clerk's office, asked for a copy of the property record, not mine, the other one. The clerk's voice was slow, friendly, the kind that comes from years of reading deeds and lien notices. By mid-afternoon, the mail brought another envelope from Suncrest, this one marked follow-up. I didn't open it yet. I left it on the kitchen counter next to the unopened lock, both of them like bait. Through the side gate, I heard Mason again. He knocked twice before coming in. "Grandpa, Dad says he'll stop by this weekend," he said, setting his backpack on the floor. He unzipped it and pulled out a toy car. "Mom said not to leave this at your place, but I wanted to show you." I turned the car over in my hand bright red, with a sticker on the bottom, "Property of Cedarview Activities Room." I set it down gently, wrote in the pad, "Their worlds are bleeding into mine." 2 weeks later, the letter from the bank arrived in a plain white envelope, the kind that never carries good news. Inside, a single sheet. Notice of default. 3rd payment. Missed. The print was cold and official, the dates like small black stones. I set it on the desk beside the legal pad, the red underlines from my earlier notes matching the ones on the bank's letter. This was the lever. The phone call to the mortgage department was short. I confirmed my status as co-borrower, asked for the exact payoff amount, and wrote it down to the penny. The woman on the line hesitated, then said, "You have the right to cure the default directly, Mr. Parker. If you do, the lien stays, but the other party will no longer control the asset without your consent." That afternoon, I walked into the same bank, handed over a cashier's check. The pen I used to sign the form was chained to the counter, its plastic barrel warm from other hands. When the teller slid the stamped receipt across, I folded it into my coat pocket without looking at it again. Outside, the wind pushed against me, sharp and dry. Across the street, a real estate office had its window full of bright photos, smiling couples, freshly painted porches, words like, "Sold in 3 days." Back home, I called a title company I hadn't spoken to in years. "I want to initiate a transfer," I said. "Property on Cedar Lane, currently under joint mortgage. I've cured the default." The man on the other end asked for the parcel number, his keyboard clicking slow and steady. By late afternoon, the first set of documents came by email. Purchase agreement, with me as sole buyer. The numbers were neat, the terms clean. I printed them, signed each page with the same deliberate hand I'd used at the notary. As the printer cooled, Mason knocked at the side door. "Grandpa, look what I built," he said, holding up a small Lego house. Red roof, green door. On the side was a little gray chimney, just like mine. Laura stood behind him, arms crossed. Her eyes went to the folder on my desk. "You've been busy," she said, "just keeping things in order." I told her, the same words I'd used before. When they left, I added one line to the pad. House on Cedar Lane mine before month's end. It was 3 days after I signed the last page of the purchase agreement when they came. No call ahead, no text, just the sharp knock on the front door in the middle of a gray afternoon. Through the peephole, I saw Evan on the step, Rick a half step behind him, hands in the pockets of his black coat. The lower lock turned easily. They still had the old key, but the top deadbolt held. "Dad, can we talk?" Evan's voice was forced light, the kind he used on waiters when the order came out wrong. I opened the door just wide enough to see their faces. Rick's eyes moved past me, scanning the hallway. "We heard about the situation with the Cedar Lane property," Rick said. His tone was measured, but his jaw worked under the skin. "That wasn't necessary. It was overdue," I said. Evan shifted his weight. "Look, this is family. We can work something out." The words were almost the same as the text I'd screenshotted a week ago. I didn't answer right away. Behind them, across the street, the neighbor's kid was shooting hoops in the driveway, the echo of the ball loud in the still air. "Mind if we come in?" Evan asked. "I do," I said. Rick's smile was small, tight. "You think you've won something here, Dan?" I looked at him the way you look at a stranger who stepped into your lane in the grocery store. "I think I've secured what's mine." They stood there another moment, as if waiting for me to back down. When I didn't, Evan nodded once, quick, and they turned toward the street. The sound of their shoes on the wet pavement followed them to the car. Inside, I wrote in the pad, "Visit 2:10 p.m. Old key used. Deadbolt stopped entry. Mentioned Cedar Lane." I set the pen down, poured coffee into the scratched mug, and sat at the table until the street was quiet again. The morning after their visit, the house felt lighter. I brewed coffee and set the mug beside the folder on my desk. The manila edges were starting to fray, the clasp bent from use. I opened it and laid out what I'd been holding back: the Cedarview email with Evan's name, the flyer marked special corporate rate, the Suncrest letter from Elena Price, and the photo of the email header with Rick's company domain. The text message too. "We can work this out. No need for drama." I scanned each page into a single PDF, giving it the plain title, Documentation, Personal Use, PDF. Then I wrote a short, flat cover note. "To whom it may concern, I believe the attached materials may indicate a misuse of corporate relationships and resources for personal gain, including attempts to influence a private care facility for non-consensual placement. Regards, Daniel Parker." The company's compliance email was easy to find. One click, and the file was gone from my outbox, off to wherever such things are sorted and weighed. By noon, the wind had picked up. I watched from the kitchen as the neighbor's flag snapped and twisted against a white sky. The street was otherwise still. At 3, a short reply landed in my inbox. "Mr. Parker, we have received your submission. You may be contacted for further information." I printed it and slid it into the folder behind the bank's default notice. Later that afternoon, I saw the silver SUV again, creeping past the house. It didn't stop this time, but I wrote it down in the pad. SUV, 4:27 p.m., same as 11/12. By evening, Mason came alone, his backpack bumping against his side. "Mom's on the phone," he said, stepping inside. He looked at the desk. "Why do you keep all those papers?" "They help me remember what happened," I said. He nodded, the way kids do when they don't understand but accept the answer anyway. Then he pulled out the Lego house from last time and added a little fence around it. When he left, I added one more line. "Fence is good. Keeps things in." 2 mornings later, an email came in just after 8. "Mr. Parker, thank you for your cooperation. The matter you reported has been reviewed. The employee in question has been placed on administrative leave pending further action." I read it twice, printed it once, and slid it into the folder behind the Cedar Lane purchase agreement. The page was still warm from the printer when I closed the drawer. Outside, frost clung to the grass in the narrow strip between my driveway and the neighbor's. A man in a brown coat was walking his dog, the leash slack, steam rising from his coffee cup. At 9, I called my attorney. "I want to move forward with the deed transfer," I said. The Maple Street property into a living trust for my grandson. No co-trustees, no access until he's of age. I can have the paperwork ready by Friday, she said. The rest of the morning, I cleared the desk. Old receipts, expired insurance cards, and a paperclip chain I didn't remember starting went into the trash. In their place, I set the folder, a pen, and the framed photo of Elaine. By afternoon, a heavy envelope arrived from the title company final closing packet for Cedar Lane. My name alone on the deed. I signed where the yellow tabs pointed, slid the pages back into the return envelope. Around 4, Mason came by with a drawing folded into quarters. "It's our house," he said. The paper showed the same red roof and green door as his Lego build, but now there was a thick black line all around. "That's the fence," he explained. "Keeps out the bad guys." Laura stood at the bottom of the porch steps, her hands buried in her coat pockets. She didn't come up. After they left, I unfolded the drawing again, set it beside the photo of Elaine. The black fence stood out against the bright colors. I wrote in the pad, "Trust papers Friday. Cedar Lane closed. Fence is built." The letter from Rick's company came by certified mail. The envelope was thick, the return address printed in small, blocky type. Inside, 2 pages. The first thanking me for my cooperation in an internal matter. The second, confirming that the employee had been terminated for violations of corporate ethics policy. I read them once, slid them into the folder behind the trust draft. The paper still smelled faintly of printer toner. At noon, the sky turned the color of wet slate. I made coffee, stood at the kitchen window watching the neighbors' kids chase each other between piles of raked leaves. Their laughter carried through the cold air. Mason came by an hour later, his backpack half unzipped, Lego pieces rattling inside. He sat at the table, building in silence. I was at the counter, sorting mail, when he said, almost in a whisper, "They were talking last night. Mom said you took their house. Rick said it's over now." I kept my hands on the envelopes, feeling the paper edges under my thumbs. "What else did they say?" "That you made some calls, and now Rick doesn't have his job. Mom said they need to rethink the plan." He shrugged, turning his Lego house so the green door faced me. I nodded, not trusting myself to answer. When he was done, he slid the Lego fence closer to the house, pressing it into place with both hands. "It's stronger now," he said, looking up at me. After he left, I wrote in the pad, "Rick terminated. Laura and Evan aware. Plan collapsed. Outside, the last of the leaves skittered across the street, catching in the drain at the curb. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from somewhere down the block. I sat back at the desk, opened the trust draft, and signed on the marked lines. The pen moved slow, the ink soaking into the paper. One more page, and the house would be his. Friday morning, the trust papers were ready. I walked to the attorney's office through a sharp wind that carried the smell of rain. The lobby was warm, the carpet soft underfoot. She met me at a small table near the back. The documents were stacked in a neat pile, a yellow tab marking each signature line. "Once these are signed and filed," she said, "the Maple Street property will be held in trust for Mason. Irrevocable. Only you as trustee until he's 18. I signed slowly, each page sliding to the left as it was done. When the last one was in the folder, she closed it with both hands and gave a small nod. Outside, the rain had started light, steady drops on the sidewalk. I walked home, the folder under my coat. At the house, Evan's car was in the driveway. He was standing by the porch steps, hands in his jacket pockets. "You really went through with it," he said when I came up. "Yes." He looked at the street, then back at me. "You didn't have to do all this." "You did," I said. For a moment he looked like he might say more, but instead he walked past me, down the sidewalk, and got into his car. The engine started, and he drove away without looking back. Inside, I set the trust folder on the desk next to Mason's Lego house. The fence was still in place, the green door facing forward. From the kitchen window, I saw Mason in the yard next door, kicking a soccer ball in the wet grass. He waved when he saw me, and I raised my hand in return. I wrote the final line in the pad: "House secured, fence will hold."